Sukihanju and good evening to ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Dhamma Dana series, brought to you by Buddhist Mahavihara Malaysia. Today's sessions is also live on TBC and Facebook. Do subscribe to our Facebook for more information. The topic for tonight is why does chanting and memorizing suttas become an obstruction to attaining Nibbana by Dr. Gamini Abhaya from UK. He is a doctor from UK who have gained some experience in enlightenment. Let's welcome Dr. Gamini to our live sessions. Good evening, doctor, and over to you now.
Good evening to those uh, who are in Malaysia and in the southern hemisphere, and good day for everybody else. Today's talk, I must say, I must thank for inviting me again to give a talk on various aspects of enlightenment. Today's heading is why chanting and memorizing suttas become an obstruction to attaining Nibbana or becoming enlightenment. I would add to that worshipping as well. Worshipping, chanting, and memorizing suttas had been a hallmark of the religion called Buddhism. And as I mentioned in the last few talks, I gave through this channel that when vision became a religion, the Buddha vision or seeing Buddha became a religion, then the enlightened people were not actually found afterwards. And something happened about 450 years after the demise of Tathagata, that a vision or a seeing changed into a religion, completely opposite way to the path of Nibbana. And since that incident, or since that era, there have been no enlightened ones known or recorded in the history. So these three things that I mentioned earlier, that's chanting, worshipping, and memorizing suttas, became hallmark of the religion called Buddhism. And they completely lost the way towards Nibbana because of these, as well as beliefs came into being, and reverence also was included in this system. And then it became a person acquiring knowledge and also believing in things that are not proven in any way. Now, in Buddha vision or seeing Buddha, the proofs come within you, within the body. And because the knowledge that arises come from the body, is already existent in your own body. And this is very important, because the knowledge or becoming intelligent, and Buddha means intelligence, and becoming intelligent arises from within the body. And that is well known in the Buddhist circles called Paccattam Veditabbo. Paccattam means from within. Veditabbo means to be known. So all the knowledge that you need to acquire is already within you. And it is a case of unearthing or discovering what's already present within your body. And to do that, it's not difficult, but unfortunately, various practices have come into this category or the area called religion, and that has become an obstruction. Instead of being helpful to attain Nibbana, they have become obstructions. And I'm going to discuss today why such activities, as done by a person called me, obstruct the way to Nibbana or enlightenment or seeing Buddha. The first thing that anybody who's wanting to study or get to know what Buddha is and how to see Buddha is to first understand where you are now first, where your knowledge comes from right at this moment, and then what sort of knowledge you want to acquire when you see Buddha, and then how to get to that position. So the first thing is where you are now, and you will realize when you understand where you are now and how you acquire knowledge at present, then you will understand why I say chanting, worshipping, and memorizing suttas will have will actually obstruct the path to Nibbana. Now, currently, where you are now is acquiring knowledge through your senses from outside, from what we call bahire. Bahire in Buddhist terms means external. And your knowledge is within you. That's called ajantiko. Ajantiko means within you. So there are two categories of knowledge, one outside your body and the other one within your body. So why does acquiring knowledge from outside your body obstruct the path to acquiring knowledge from inside? And this is the heading today. The first thing is you acquire knowledge from outside through your sense organs in the form of what we call rupa, a picture. Whether it comes from the eye or through sound or through touch, ultimately a picture falls on your mind. And that picture is interpreted by using your memory to first identify it, and then you make an opinion about it, what we call a thought, to identify that object. And that's the simplest thought. It's just simply identifying an object. Like if you see a tree, you identify it as a tree, and that's a thought. And when you acquire knowledge from that, it is actually an image that comes through your sense organs. If you take the eye, it is the light that's reflected off the tree that falls on your eye. So some of the light, so we call in science some of the rays in different colors, are absorbed by the leaves or part of the tree, and what is not absorbed is reflected towards your eye, and you acquire the knowledge that comes through that lights. What is actually not on the tree is a shadow or just an image of what is not, because what is in the tree is not reflected off the tree because it absorbs that sort of part of the spectrum of the light. So what you acquire is an illusion, is an image or a shadow of an illusion. It is the same for sound, it's the same for touch, taste, and smell. So those illusions you acquire as pictures or rupa and program in your mind using the memory, and then you give them names and you identify them through names, and then you interact with the environment outside by acquiring information about an illusion. But the knowledge that comes from inside is what we call the truth, and the truth of nature, where the actual way the nature is only found inside your physical body. And now here we have to differentiate between the physical body and the mind. And I've discussed that in the past in detail, but today I will just briefly mention that if you take your own body and analyze into functional areas, there are 3 spaces that work together to form these illusions. And the first is your physical body that you can see and touch. The other one is the mind that you cannot see but still present within your body, all over the body, everywhere the body is, everywhere the mind is as well. And then an attraction between the body and the mind to keep these 2 spaces together, so that wherever you go, you take all these 3 spaces together and you won't leave any one of the spaces behind. So your body and the mind go together because of that attraction. And that attraction is also considered a space. We consider it and describe it as a space because it's also found all over the body. But for your sense organs, what you see or what you touch is only the physical part of the body. The rest is all hidden inside. But they function all together. So when those 3 function together and an image falls on your sense organ, it is transmitted through your nerves via the brain to the mind, and the mind then processes it by using the images that are stored in the memory as images and not as what you would normally call the way it is, the nature. Actually, the way it is does not contain any images. You process various things that come together as one full image, and you call it a tree or a table or a chair, and you identify the object that way. So in this process, you will only get an opinion or knowledge about an illusion outside. So if you read a book and memorize certain parts without actually knowing what that means, now most people chant by just memorizing, because you hear it and you memorize it through sound. You see it and read it in a book and then memorize it through that system. And you will, most of us who memorize these parts in the verses in the suttas, we don't have an idea of what we are memorizing, because it is difficult to find actually the correct meanings of those words, because they are all now hidden and changed during the course of time. And even if you try to understand from dictionaries or from people who know the language of Pali, you will not get the real meaning of what has been said originally, because the meanings have over a period of time constantly changed, and sometimes some words have completely opposite meaning. And that's the way it has changed 180 degrees completely other way. For example, if you say kalpa, there's a word called kalpa. It means in the current language, or what we understand now, is a very, very long time, kalpa. But its actual meaning, original meaning, that it is a moment. just a moment. It's also called shana. It means just a moment. So you can see a moment, the meaning has completely changed over to a very, very long time. So you can see how things have moved along during the course of time over a period of thousands of years. The meanings have changed, and so even if you understand what's in these sutras, you won't get the real meaning of them. And on top of that, the sutras have been altered, changed, added, corrupted by various people during the course of time when they write new versions, and they have introduced their own views without becoming enlightened. So things that are found in some of the sutras are not accurate. And since those sutras were written, there's no record of anybody attaining enlightenment or seeing Nibbana. So that is the memorizing. And if you chant them, a lot of people think, and there's a sort of area or a sector of Buddhism which has developed or evolved by merely chanting some of these sutras or verses, and they think that they get some benefit. Even if you know what you're talking about or what you're chanting, then it's still there's no benefit by just chanting these. And there's no way that somebody can open the path to Nibbana, because the path to Nibbana is you have to stop thinking, because it's a thinking process that prevents arising of this knowledge of Nibbana from within. The knowledge of Nibbana is within you, and you are processing all the time information from outside, which has nothing to do with the information that's within you. So it's completely different aspect, and all those you acquire from outside are illusions, as I mentioned. What is not outside? What is outside? The way the system has developed, like light, sound, and so on, you cannot acquire, because they absorb those light rays, those colors of the light rays, and reflect only the ones that are not absorbed. So if you see a leaf green, it's actually not green. It's all the colors other than green, because the green was not absorbed and it was reflected off the leaf into your eyes, and you perceive it as green. So it is important to know that when the mind is active, when information is obtained through the five senses, it goes through the mind and nowhere else. When the mind is active, there is always a person called me within that system, because the way you store your information in your memory, which is not the mind, memory is stored in the brain, which is part of the physical body, and in that memory stored system, the information is stored like in a balance. You have in a balance two baskets and a rod in between the two baskets that holds the two baskets together, like in a weighing scale or weighing balance. And one has the rupa stored in it, one basket, and the other basket has a name attached to it, stored in it. So if you see something like a tree, it's called a tree. You have the image of the tree in one basket and the name in the other basket. And that is how we store information in memory through this system of sense organs, the brain, the mind, and the memory. So in the brain, the part of the memory stores information in the form of two baskets, and these two baskets are linked by the rod, the so-called me, because it becomes my knowledge afterwards. You might obtain that information from somebody else or by reading a book, and then this knowledge is stored as your knowledge. So there is always me in it. So if that memory is used to identify an object later on, and another image falls and it looks like the same image from the memory, and you call it a tree, and that is your knowledge, and that's me. So with all the thoughts, there's always the notion of me arising within you. It is I who saw it. It's I who got to know it. It's I who heard that noise or sound. So the system is developed in such a way that every time you gather an information and store it and then recover that information from the memory on a later occasion, there's always I or me embedded in that. So you always feel it's a person called me who's doing this. So in chanting and memorizing, it's the same story. It's me who's memorizing that. It's me who's chanting. So in that sort of system, you are going exactly the opposite direction to Nibbana. Because the direction to Nibbana is unearthing your own knowledge which has been stored within your body, that has not been acquired from outside. Because the nature, the way it is there are very tiny particles that arise and cease. Everywhere in the universe is the same, and exactly the same in your own body as well. And these particles, some people might call electrons, protons, and so on, but they are much further away from electrons. If you keep dividing your physical body and subdividing, you go on subdividing again and again, at the end you come to a very tiny particle that cannot be divided any further. And these particles cannot be seen through your eyes, or you cannot acquire any information about those particles through your five senses, because your five senses are not geared to acquire information of that level. They are much they are trained to acquire information at a much superficial level, very low level, through images, and not exactly as they are. So these tiny particles actually consist of knowledge. So that's how the knowledge is stored inside. In fact, that if you now probably you will realize that all the objects that you see even outside or within you, everything consists of ultimately of knowledge. But then that knowledge cannot be tapped through your senses. So you need to open a special eye for that information to be unearthed, and that special eye is called prajna. That's called panya in Magadhi, prajna in Sanskrit, and that's loosely translated into what we call wisdom in English. But wisdom is used in different ways in our spoken language in day-to-day life. But this particular prajna, if you call it wisdom, it is the wisdom of information from within. We don't normally apply when we call wisdom in our day-to-day talks, day-to-day language, from any information that arises within your body, from within your body. So it is essential that this information is obtained through a system called prajna, which does not open up when you keep thinking. When a thought process occurs, the prajna goes under. It's prevented from arising prevented from giving that information which is stored in your body when the five senses obtain information about illusions outside. So if you obtain information from a book or information from somebody else through your mind by the system of thinking and then memorizing and then chanting them back again, there is no purpose served in helping one to attain Nibbana or on the way to Nibbana. Because that's the one which obstructs the rising of the eye of Prajna. If the eye of Prajna were to be exposed, freed from these thoughts, then you will be able to see what's inside your bodies, what your bodies are made of ultimately. And these tiny particles that arise and cease are called Dhamma. So when the eye of Prajna opens, it sees Dhamma. And Nibbana is further from Dhamma, but that's the one that stage you see first. And this is also called Sankhara in Buddhist terms. Sang means a collection or conglomeration. Kara means information, or it's called Karanam or Karunu means information. So this conglomeration of information, that means if you take it as units, few units of information come together, conglomerate, and then they appear as a particle to the eye of Prajna, but it is not a physical particle that can be measured, weighed, but you can't measure the height, the length or the breadth of those particles, but it is seen as a particle and interpreted as a particle by the eye of Prajna. And these particles arise and cease all the time, and the arising and ceasing happening at the same time. There is no time in between, and that's very difficult to comprehend through your mind, because when the mind is active, you will try to think if somebody to arise and something to arise and cease, there must be some time in between, because it has to arise before it ceases. So there must be time. So in this situation, the eye of Prajna sees differently. They arise at the same time. It's like up and down, the duality that we encounter in day-to-day life, like good and bad and up and down. If there's no up, there's no down. So there are actually arising and ceasing, although we call it arising and ceasing, there are two ends of a duality. So this duality exists at the same time. And I put some inverted commas on this existence, because there is no existence if there's no time. But just to impress upon you what it means, I have used that word. The arising and ceasing happens at the same time. There is no time in between. So it is also called, this Dhamma, also called Akaliko. Akaliko means, Kalika means, Kale means Dhamma, and Akaliko means no time, timeless. So we are going in deep into the exact nature of the way it is, and we find that at that level, there is no time, and time is, of course, formed and perpetuated by the activity of the mind. It's actually, time is a function of mind. If you are fast asleep where the mind is not active, you don't feel the time passing during that time, and you don't feel that there's a person called me at that deep sleep, because you're not thinking. Only when you're thinking, every thought has this notion called me, and they are also then captured by what you call time. So chanting, memorizing actually obstructs, because for you to chant, you have to memorize or read from a book through your mind, through your senses. So then the the mind, sense organs, and the brain axis always active, and that prevents the emergence of the eye of prajna. So if you were to see Dhamma and then Buddha, then you have to stop thinking. And people wonder how to do that. And I have explained in the previous talks few tricks how to get, or few tricks are that these tricks are the sutras. Sutra means a trick or a way to bypass or overcome the system of thinking. So now, if you memorize sutra as sutra without knowing the meaning of the word sutra, then it's of no use to anybody, not even to yourself. And so this notion of self, notion of me, and the information that you from outside, they're all linked together, and they suppress the path to Nibbana. So at the beginning of the discussion, I mentioned that we need to know where you are, and this is exactly what I explain now. Where you are is you continue to interact with the environment by obtaining information from outside through your senses as rupa, and store them as rupa with a name attached to it, and then recover them from time to time from this so-called memory in the brain, and then interact with the environment. But all knowledge that you obtain are about illusions, actually what's not there. And that's called mithya. Mithya means untruth. It's not the truth. So if you want to know the truth, unfortunately, when you know the truth, or when the eye of prajna opens, there is no me, so there is no you who is knowing the truth. It is the eye of prajna that sees Nibbana, it's not you. Although in our talks we just mentioned it's you, it is the eye of prajna. There's no person who sees Nibbana. It is the eye of prajna that sees Nibbana. Because that notion is present only when you think, and at the time you see Nibbana, there is no thinking. And prajna, eye, will not open up if you keep thinking. So the tricks that we use to stop thinking and move along the path to Nibbana are called sutras, the tricks. Because always, when the mind is active, you have to use a trick to get away from that mind, to suppress that mind, because the mind won't let you do anything to suppress the mind. If you try to do it, if you try to stop thinking, then the mind will put you to sleep. And then you can't recover any information from inside or outside. So to obtain information from inside, you have to be awake, but not through the mind. And the wakefulness of the mind is called vijnana. In Buddhist circles, vijnana is termed as, again, the meaning has changed to knowledge obtained from outside, but that's wrong. Vijnana is the wakefulness through the mind. And then what you have to do is to get rid of this wakefulness through the mind through a sutra or a trick, and be awake through a different system called jnana. And that system, the mind is totally inactive. A different system arises called chitta. Chitta is completely different to mind. There are some similarities, but the way it works is different. Because for the mind, you need to have an image falling on your mind to be awake. But whereas when you awake from jnana through chitta, you don't have to have an image. It has the mechanism to be awake without an image falling on it. So we use that system to move to prajna as an interface. From one side the mind, the other side the prajna, and we move on to this sort of top of the fence, like to fall onto the correct side. But you can be awake from chitta and fall back to the mind system, or fall onto the correct side or to the prajna system. So without going through this intermediate system called jnana, you cannot get to the other side. So first thing, you understand where you are, what you do now, how information is collected through the mind, and be awake through the mind, and there's always self or me entrenched in it. And then you need to move away from that. Leave behind me, leave behind the information from outside, and be awake without any information, neither from outside nor from inside. And that's the on the fence stage, which is called chitta. And then move on to open the eye of prajna by suppressing the mind totally, so that the mind will not be able to arise again, and it is destroyed. Destroyed means destroyed without any remains, and that's called asesa nirodho. Without a remain, nirodha in Buddhist circles is destroying it without a remain. And this is very difficult to understand, in fact impossible to understand through the mind, because when you understand through the mind, anything that you divide and subdivide and keep on subdividing, you will end up with something at the end. You will not end up with nothing. So you will have pieces. If you break let's say a chair into pieces, you will have the legs separate and the sitting part separate and the back separate. But here there will be nothing left, and that's what happened to the mind. So the mind cannot arise again, and you will move on one step forward towards intelligence. You become a little more intelligent than through your mind, and then from chitta to prajna, you become even more intelligent, and prajna will give you information from inside. Chitta doesn't, but prajna will give you information from inside. And prajna will see Dhamma, see these tiny particles and arising and ceasing, and also see beyond that, where this arising and ceasing stops. And that is called Nibbana. There are no particles, but it's only a place of knowledge. That means those conglomerations of those knowledge within these to form particles does also separate. They separate off into each unit of knowledge, individual units of knowledge, which has no particle feature in it. And that is what prajna sees as Nibbana. There is no arising and cease in there, because there's no particle to arise or cease. But there is knowledge. It's not an empty state, empty position or a state. It has all the purest knowledge that is available in nature. Now there are other steps that you need to pass beyond that as well to obtain further information from that. The eye of prajna can only see Nibbana. It can't obtain the knowledge that is in Nibbana. So you need to move further to get the knowledge that's found within Nibbana. But the eye of prajna can bring out knowledge in Dhamma. Those accumulated, conglomerated knowledge, all called sankhara, can be separated and obtained as knowledge from within. So you don't read books, you don't have to listen to anybody else, and the knowledge comes within. That's very nice, isn't it? You don't have to make any effort. to obtain knowledge, it just arises from within. When all the knowledge about nature is stored there. So whatever the knowledge that you obtain by reading books or listening to other people, they are all illusions. And even if you obtain this knowledge that I'm giving you now through your mind, what will happen is that they become an illusion. Even the truth about Dhamma and the path to Nibbana is stored in your mind and memory as a rupa, then it becomes an obstruction to open the path of Nibbana. So, chanting, memorizing suttas, and also now I added worshipping. There is no worship. Now, worships and beliefs are all in religions. There is no belief, there is no reason to believe anything that somebody else says unless you found it from within yourself. Even then it doesn't become a belief, then it becomes a fact. So if somebody wants to know whether Tathagata attained Nibbana, what you have to do is for you to attain Nibbana, and then of course it's not you attaining, it's the Ayo Prajna, and then there will be that knowledge that Tathagata attained the same thing that Prajna I saw. Until then you won't know. So something, it's only a statement in a book that there was somebody called Tathagata who attained Nibbana. So if you want to know whether he attained Nibbana by yourself, you have to attain yourself. And you know then it is exactly the same because everybody sees the same thing. Because Dhamma, wherever you go, whoever it has, whichever the body contained in, is the same. So the experience is the same, the vision or seeing is the same, and the knowledge in Dhamma and Nibbana is the same. So it is something that people need to know, those who practices not just Buddhism as a religion, every religion. They have this kind of chanting, they have memorizing, they have beliefs, they have worship, they have reverence. That's none of them apply to the true Buddha vision or seeing of Buddha. And in fact, they become obstructions because they are all processed through your mind. So now you realize that if you process anything through your mind, that becomes an obstruction to Nibbana. Even if you listen to the truth through your mind, it becomes a rupa and it gets stored as a rupa. And then that prevents your eye of prajna opening up. So what you have to do is just listen and understand and not put anything in the memory. This is very important because it's the memory that's the command and control of the mind. It's the high fluent place of control. If there is no memory, the mind can't function. In fact, I mentioned this in a previous talk, that there are two ways to attain Nibbana. One is by yourself without listening to anybody, but you can find out the path from him or her, but not exactly listen to the truth. And that is what is practiced in so-called the Mahayana sector. And in the Theravada sector, which Mahayana people call Hinayana because it's not very good, they say, because it's easy. You listen to somebody telling the truth, but you listen not through your mind, you listen through Dhamma. It is the Dhamma which listens. That is wrongly interpreted as what somebody says is Dhamma. And you listen. But actually, it is Dhamma that listens, and Dhamma is contained within your body. And for your Dhamma to listen, you have to make Dhamma the leader, the command and control, rather than your mind. How do you do that? Is by stopping thinking. When you stop thinking and still be awake through Chitta, then Dhamma becomes a leader. And your Dhamma becomes a leader, and that Dhamma is capable of listening to the truth. It only hears the truth. It doesn't hear illusions. It doesn't hear untruth. It only hears the truth. And during that process, one can attain Nibbana, and the eye of Prajna can open up. So it is essentially, whichever way you practice, whether it's through your own effort, and that effort, if you're doing it on your own, is the effort to get rid of all what you have stored in your memory, particularly regarding things about religion or religions, all the stuff and information. So whatever you have memorized, all these sutras you have memorized, even if you knew the meaning, even if you knew the exact meaning of those as it was preached some 2000 years ago, still it will be an obstruction to, and if it's in the memory, obstruction to the path of Nibbana, because the memory will always communicate with your mind. So people might ask, how can you live without memory? But once you have passed the stage of Chitta to Prajna and see Nibbana, what we call memory, the information that's stored as Rupa, will be stored everywhere in your body, like the whole body, like becoming a brain. But not in the same format like Rupa. It's in a different format. Say, there are lots of formats that you can store pictures. Now, in the memory in the brain, it stores as Nama Rupa. Nama is a name, Rupa is a image, linked by a person called me. That's the rod between the two baskets. Rod that connects the two baskets. But it can be stored in different forms. As you know, in computers, you have all sorts of methods, JPG and PG, and all sorts of methods, and in the digital form. So there are other forms that these can be stored, and that all that information will be stored all over the body, because there is no differentiation between the brain and the body after you have opened your eye of Prajna. So Prajna will obtain information from right through your body as stored in Dhamma. And what Dhamma stores is the format, is the truth format, because it knows only the truth. So you become more intelligent and the system becomes more efficient. So when somebody asks you a question, you don't have to tap your head or forehead or just to get things from the memory. It comes automatically very quickly, and the answers are there straight away to all the questions. So now you know where you are now, because it's a system that uses the mind. Where you need to go is to open up the eye of Prajna. And how you go, I mentioned briefly, by stopping thinking and then being awake through jnana, through chitta, and then allowing Dhamma to become the leader, and either by listening or on your own, let the eye of Prajna open. The eye of Prajna is already within you. It cannot open when you're thinking, when the mind is active. So when you chant, memorize, or worship, what you're doing is preventing the eye of Prajna to open up. So in summary, when you consider, when you understand where you are now and where you're going and the path to that destination, you know chanting worshipping, memorizing, beliefs, reverence are all where you start on the wrong side. And they enrich the mind and enrich the thought process, enrich the self format, so that you will never find out the state where there is no me or no I, no self, which is called anatta. In Buddhist circles, no self is when you consider Dhamma that arises and ceases, there's no person in those. They are just individual particles that arise and cease. Right? I hope we are coming towards the end of the discussion now. And if there are questions, I will take up and try to answer them. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions, because without asking questions, you will not be able to get through this system, or at least to understand what the mind does and how the mind axis, mind, brain, and sense organ axis function. And unfortunately, if you understand through the mind the answers that I give, they become obstructions to path of Nibbana. So what you should do is just understand, not put anything in the memory for the moment. Because when Dhamma listens, it doesn't store anything, it just listens. It doesn't store in a different format. And that's the way normally you should do to attain Nibbana or seeing Buddha. So we now itself, if you practice or get used to that system of just understand, that's all. Separate understanding from memory. Don't put anything about these talks in your memory. If you put anything in your memory for you to discuss with somebody later or to extract it later and think about it, then it becomes an obstruction. So this is the difficulty, and this is the thing that people have not understood. This is when the seeing converted into a religion, and this is what happened. Because people thought that how can you do these things without thinking? And these sectors gained prominence and then converted it into a religion. And then subsequently, many other religions also started. Although it's the same thing that they mentioned, and even Jesus said that you are dust, you shall return to dust. But these tiny little particles that arise and cease. And it is the chitta that creates this world and creates this rotation of the world. And if once you pass the chitta state, there's no rotation. You don't feel during the Theik or Buddha there are any rotations in the world. And it's chitta that creates the world. And he said that the chitta, which is he called Deva means it's illuminous. Because it is luminous. When you see through the eye of Prajna, you will see, when you see Chitta, you will know what it is. And it's converted to, translated into English as God. So the God is within you, he said. The kingdom of God is within you. But unfortunately, now it's become a religion. The God is somewhere else. And it's gone completely the wrong direction, taken complete reverse path, 180 degrees backwards, and it also has become a religion. But he mentioned up to the opening of the eye of Prajna, but not anything beyond that to obtain the information in Nibbana. And also, we must remember in Islam, Islam means Asmi Alam. Asmi Alam is know me. The name of it is know me, no self. And that's why in their religious sites, there are no statues or anything like that. There's no me. And they call Allah. Al means the, that means a thing. La means no. There is no thing, nothing basically. Because nothing in the sense that your sense organs to pick up, actually, if your sense organs were to become prajna, there is nothing to pick up. But they don't normally become prajna, but they have to be completely suppressed for the eye of prajna to open up. So all the so-called religions that have developed had the basis of Buddha vision and Buddha seeing. In fact, that's why many others have predicted this in the future. There won't be any religions now that this truth has emerged. All the religions will disappear, and only the truth remains, and that is Buddha vision. Buddha is not a religion. Buddhism is not Buddhism. It's Buddha vision, or seeing Buddha, or simply becoming intelligent, using a different mechanism to your mind to obtain information from within. So have you had any questions?
Thank you, Doctor, for sharing us the Dharma session tonight. We have one question for tonight. I'll post it up for you.
Does meditation help in this case? Other than meditation, is there any other method to attain Nibbana? Unfortunately, meditation does not. If you know and understand what meditation is, then you know they are no different to chanting, memorizing, worshipping, or believing. Because meditation, by definition, is controlling or developing the mind. Controlling or developing the mind. So, which means it's not destroying the mind, it's not making the mind inactive, it's completely the opposite. It enhances the mind, it improves the mind, it develops the mind, and it controls the mind. So, those processes during meditation, whatever meditation you do, there are two types of meditation. One is called samatha, the other one is called vipassana. Samatha is one-pointedness meditation practiced by Brahmins in other religions, Hindu, Jain religions all over the world, even before Tathagata was born. And that is trying to imagine something in your mind, imagine a picture, and then closing your eyes and then imagining it from within and purifying it from within. And as you purify, you go up the ladder, what we call dhyanas, or states of absorption. And you go up to 8 levels, and then at the end of the 8th level, you go to sleep. The last one is called neva sanya na sanya. That means no information that comes to your mind. So they think mind is still, but the next stage you fall asleep. That means there's no sanya, no information that comes when you fall asleep. So that is a dead end. And then there's another one called vipassana that was a synthesis or a product of Burma. In 1875, a priest called Lilius Chua who invented this. And it is also telling your mind what the body does. That is called vipassana meditation in various forms, walking meditation, or spreading Maitri, or various parameters of Hindu religion like Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekka. They are parts of the basis of fundamentals of Hindu religion, and various other activities. They thought when understanding the body, that you must actually know how the body is constituted by these tiny particles that arise and cease. They were analyzing it from what the 5 senses see in your body. Like walking, I bend the knee, I touch the foot on the ground, and so on, and keep telling the mind. So the mind becomes more and more awake. And all these meditation, whether it's samatha or vipassana, you are awake through vijnana. As long as you are awake through vijnana, the mind is active, and therefore it obstructs the path to Nibbana. And that is why, by meditating, nobody has attained Nibbana. If meditation has led to Nibbana, long before Tathagata was born, other religions like Hindu, Jain religion, there would have been people who have attained Nibbana. There are nobody that we have recorded in the history. So meditation, by definition, is a way through vijnana, and in fact, in some of the sutras, this is mentioned. That if ever you wake up through the mind or wake up through vijnana, that is not the pathway to Nibbana. You might feel a bit happier, that the mind feels happy. But that when you attain dhyana stages, but that is also still an illusion, because you start going through an image, you keep thinking, images keep falling on the mind, like a picture being projected on a screen during a film. It's exactly the same sort of thing that continues. And so however long you attend meditation or practice meditation, you will not attain Nibbana. And also the history also says in the book that Prince Siddhartha also meditated for 6 years, but with no results, and he gave up. So anybody who is attaining, doing meditation to attain Nibbana will be obstructed by his own efforts. The path to Nibbana closes up. It's not in front of him. He is directed exactly in the opposite direction by doing meditation, because you develop the mind rather than relinquish it. It's not cheto vimukti, it's generating more and more thoughts, not release from the thought process. People have not realized this and not taking it seriously, and most Buddhist centers have meditation classes, meditation sessions, retreats, but none of them have attained Nibbana. Nibbana is very easy to attain if you understand the very basic principles of how the mind works, how it should be abolished or destroyed. So, in summary, meditation as practiced today is an obstruction to Nibbana, just as chanting, memorizing, worshipping, believing, performing reverence, or obtaining precepts like sila, sadhana, sila, bhavana. Always there is a person called me, and you do it with good thoughts, they say, but they are all thoughts. It is good or bad is determined by you, not by the nature.
That's all the questions that we have for tonight. Thank you, Doctor. On behalf of the monk and management of Mahavihara, we would like to thank Doctor for his time and sharing his Dhamma knowledge with us. We would also like to express our gratitude to all our sponsors for their kind donations and all our audience for joining us tonight. Good night, everyone, and have a pleasant evening.
Yeah, and
Sukihantu.
we will meet again next Friday. I'm told that's another discussion, like at the same time. And until then, goodbye.
Thank you.